welcome to Season 13, Episode 5 of the Ubuntu Podcast. It's Tuesday, the 21st of April. In this show, as ever, we're going to be talking about community news and events. And I'm joined by two gentlemen who are both my very good friends, Martin and Alan. Hello, chaps.
Sick burn, yes. Hello.
Hello, friend.
Oh, dear. Alan, what have you been up to in the past couple of weeks?
I have been beating Martin around the head with a spade.
Is this a physical spade or a virtual spade?
This is not a euphemism. This is
Is it some new VR thing?
I wish. It's a video game called Open Spades. It's been around for ages, and I wanted to play more of it. I really, really enjoy it. It's one of those games you could dip into. You just launch the game, start playing, and then when you're bored or you get killed too much, you rage quit. So I set up my own server because I was sick of the other servers being either full of hackers or having rubbish maps on them. And so I created my own one, and I decided to call it Popey Spades. And I created a little website to track, because I set it up and people started joining it because it's a public server. Mm-hmm. And people joined, and then they were saying, hey, is there a Discord where we can chat? And as is an expectation of online gaming. So I created a Discord, and then I thought, oh, how am I going to tell everyone where the Discord is? I know, I'll create a little website. So it gave me another opportunity to exercise my Hugo static site building skills. And created a little website, set up a Discord, left the server running. And for a couple of weekends now, on a Friday and Saturday night, it tends to be pretty busy with up to 32 is the maximum number of players you can have at any one time. Mm-hmm. And it often hits that peak, and it seems to run okay. Cool. It's really good fun.
Yeah, it seems to be regularly full of people that gleefully shoot me in the back of the head or spade me in the back of the head if they've run out of bullets.
Yeah. And if you'd like to spade Martin, listeners, I'm sure we'll have a link in the show notes. Martin, what have you been up to?
Well, Alan briefly touched over VR, and you may have remembered me saying that I'd made a VR order purchase. Well, given the current global climate, that felt like a frivolous purchase, so I actually cancelled that order. I thought I'd come back to VR headsets at a later date, and I'm glad I did, because it turns out that what we need in our house right now is lots of tablets. There's lots of video calls and things going on for scouts and brownies and school and family get-togethers and virtual sleepovers and all of those sorts of things, virtual Easter. So instead, that money has been funneled towards, we now live in a 3-tablet household.
When am I getting my virtual sleepover invite, Martin?
Well,
that's what I want to know.
I think we need to get to know each other a little bit better first, don't you?
Okay, good friend. Which tablets did you go for?
So for Agatha, we went with an Amazon Kindle Fire 10, with all of the, rubber surrounds and everything. Mm-hmm. And I have to say, in terms of, parental controls and giving something to a young person that they can just use and make the most of, it's great. It's really good. And Agatha couldn't be happy, and because we never get blamed for the fact that, she runs out of time, because the tablet decides you've been on this too long now. And it's like, nobody can argue with the tablet. The tablet tells you it's too long, so that's great. But for Louise and I went with a Lenovo M10 for Louise and a Lenovo P10 for myself. And the only reason I've got a new tablet is that my Nexus 9, the battery has now swelled and has started to push the screen. Oh, yeah. And is like a fire hazard. So I actually have, taken that apart and tried to separate it. But I would call the M10 and P10 sort of mid-level tablets. Mm-hmm. And I quite like them because they the Android skin, there's no embellishments on the user interface, and they're simple to use and they're lightweight, and we just needed them for chatting and looking up stuff on the web. They're rubbish if you want to do Netflix, because they don't support full HD Netflix or anything like that, but as a doing video conferences with your family and chatting to your family and looking up stuff on the web, they're perfect. They run for hours and hours and hours.
Do you need full
Plus you could strap.
Do you need full HD at a 10-inch display?
Well, so that's a good point. I don't think so. It's a 10-inch display that is a full HD resolution, and because DRM and other reasons, these render a maximum of 940 by 540 on the tablet. But to be honest with you, as you can see, I'm wearing glasses right now. With my old eyes, I can't actually tell that it's not a sufficient quality. And most of the time on a tablet, I'm downloading stuff anyway, and that's of a lower quality than it streams. So it's fine. But if you care about that stuff, they don't do full HD streaming.
And with 2 tablets, you could strap one to each eye and you've got yourself a VR headset.
Oh my gosh, I had not thought of that, but this is totally something I intend to make with gaffer tape and planks of wood.
And on that note, let's get on with the show. And now it's time for some community news. And first up in the community news this week, Ubuntu 2004 LTS is out. We assume through our timey-wimey glasses. Yes, hopefully by the time you listen to this, Ubuntu 2004 will be out. So we'll have to get the inside scoop from Future Martin. So Future Martin, was the Ubuntu 2004 release smooth and issue-free?
Great success.
Excellent. We should talk more about that next week.
Let's do that.
So what has been going on with GNOME Shell in the community news, Martin?
So the GNOME Shell team, or rather Alan Day from the UX and design team at GNOME, has posted a blog talking about their plans for user experience improvements. And it covers a whole bunch of areas in terms of focus areas to include the arrangement of applications and also the spatial organization of the desktop to try and bring everything in sort of a cohesive arrangement so that, one element communicates what other elements are doing. To be perfectly honest with you, this is not my area of expertise. So it all looks very nice, but I'm not a designer, so I can't appreciate some of these grand plans.
One thing that I found interesting was they're talking about optimizing the empty state of the shell. So when you first log in and you haven't yet done anything, making sure that what it's presenting you with sort of draws you into actually knowing what features of the shell are available to you. Which I think is something I have found GNOME Shell lacks a bit in the past. So it's going to be interesting to see what they develop there.
What does that mean? I don't understand what that means. Is that like signposting where the menus and launchers and stuff like that is?
That sort of thing, yeah. Right. Kind of like, trying to sort of give affordances and cues to draw you into what's there.
So one of the things that the Ubuntu desktop team have been discussing is you may remember that GNOME removed desktop icons and Ubuntu are shipping an extension which restores some of the desktop icon functionality. And we've been debating, do we continue to do that or do we remove that extension and, honour the upstream? And then a whole debate started, which was, well, if there is this empty space, if we stop shipping desktop icons, couldn't we do something far more interesting with that bit of empty screen space? So, we've been, brainstorming ideas about what we could potentially do with what was once the place desktop icons lived. Don't have any answers for you right now, but, it'll certainly be a discussion for Virtual Guardec, I imagine, later in the year.
You know what the nerds will say? It'll be conky. Put conky all over my desktop. That's I want an exploded view of my laptop, and I want CPU meters and dials and how much RAM and my disk I/O and all that stuff like I used to have in the past. That's what the nerds
Do you want it navigable via Jurassic Park OS as well?
Yes, yes. I know this. This is a Unix system. Yes, totally. I noticed in the, getting back to the post, it says they're going to use user research as a key part of the process, which is a good thing, obviously. Yes. And it says something I've just picked up on because it niggles me. It says we've done some initial limited research to find out how many Windows apps and workspaces are typically in use. Do you know what's missing from that? How many displays are in use? Right. One of the things I think a lot of open source desktops don't pay an awful lot of attention to is people with multiple displays. They focus primarily on the single display use case. And so there are certain things that are either broken in multiple displays or don't have a good UX when there is more than one display. And I found that the defaults in GNOME Shell previously weren't very good for multiple desktops. The whole switching workspaces thing where the primary workspace switches and none of the others do just seemed weird to me. And I think we changed that by default in Ubuntu, that kind of thing. So I hope that while this isn't a fully comprehensive blog post, it's an outline of what's coming. I do hope they cover multiple.
Yeah. You raised an interesting point. Well. I mean, in a straw poll of 3, Mark, how many displays do you have connected to your computer right now?
2.
And Alan, how many displays do you have connected?
3.
And I also have 3. So in
100%
of
people we
of users have more than one display.
At an average of 2.5 displays.
Oh, dear. Anyway, in other GNOME-related community news, Alan.
Heather Ellsworth has written about the Snapcraft GNOME extension. And this, for those who don't know, Snapcraft is the tool that's used to make snaps, which are software packages. And GNOME, we know what that is. And this extension is a part of Snapcraft that makes it easier for developers of GNOME applications to package their applications as snaps. And before this extension existed, there was quite a lot of boilerplate and libraries you got a list and scripts you got a bundle and all kinds of nonsense. And the whole packaging of GNOME applications has been made easier with this extension. There's like one line you add into your Snapcraft YAML. So all you really need to do is point at the source code where the repository with your GNOME application is, specify that you want to use this GNOME extension, and it constructs stuff using defaults.
Right, so just to clarify, this is a Snapcraft extension, not a GNOME extension.
Correctamundo. Yes.
Right, good.
Nicely confusing name, but it is an extension for Snapcraft. It's built into Snapcraft. And I think there are others. I think there's a KDE one as well, isn't there?
There is, yes.
But they don't want to have like one for every desktop. I think they want to be pretty careful because they need to be maintained because they're held in the code base of Snapcraft. And with KDE and GNOME being very popular application platforms, it might be nice if there was one for Elementary, for example, so an Elementary app developer could use an extension that made it very easy for them to turn their Elementary Vala application into a Snap. That would be good.
Elementary is a great example because they have sort of a superset of what's required for GNOME because they have their own libraries that are distinctive to deliver that Elementary experience. So while they could borrow from the GNOME extension, they would then have to do a lot of that boilerplate that you were talking about to provide all of the all the extra bits of stuff. So we did try to limit how many of these extensions exist. For example, you can use the GNOME extension for all Electron applications because the overlap there is, the same. But Elementary would be a good example. And you don't need a Qt extension because the KDE extension provides everything that a basic Qt application would provide.
Next up, our favourite red-headed guest presenter, Stuart Langridge, has written a Python script to create a UK map out of squares.
Okay. I am shocked and stunned to learn that Stuart Langridge has written yet another Python script.
This was nice, though. I saw this go past on my RSS reader, and the nice part of it is, imagine you want to draw a map of the country and highlight, voting patterns, water usage, crime levels or something, and you want to break it up into a uniform image, that's what these squares are for, so that you could highlight them in different color to show whatever data you want to show. But the nice thing is his Python script allows you to specify how small the squares need to be. So the resolution, either it's a giant pixelated, broken down into like 30 squares, or it's 1,000 squares, and you can specify anywhere in between. It's really quite cute.
So how does it break it down? By geography or postcode or?
No, just vertically and horizontally, just actual squares. Just uniformly.
It starts with a proper map of the UK, and then it basically makes a low resolution version of that image based on the number of squares that you specify.
And he put some sample images, SVGs, in his blog post, and I middle clicked all of them to open them all in separate tabs, and then I flicked through them. And as you flick through them, they go from massive squares, like a very small number of massive squares, and you could just about make out that it's supposed to be the United Kingdom. And then the next one, it becomes more clear because they're smaller circles, higher resolution. And as you go through, it gets higher and higher. And if you go through each of those images one to the next, it looks like a kind of 90s video effect of going from being pixelated to, a real image.
Enhance this image.
Yes, exactly. So I pointed that out to Stuart, and he made a little animated GIF of it. Yeah.
Where is the animated GIF? Is this on Twitter or somewhere else?
He sent it to me privately on Telegram.
Oh, that's no good. Stuart, stick it on Twitter.
Maybe I'll stick it in the show notes.
Okay.
What's next?
Next up, Elizabeth Kronbach Joseph, IBM systems engineer and developer advocate, has blogged about Ubuntu on the new IBM Big Iron, which is a machine catchily called the IBM LinuxONE 3 LT2.
This is what we traditionally call a mainframe, I believe.
Yes. I like reading Elizabeth's blog posts and articles about these big things, because I have other than the picture that I see in there, it's just a big computer. I get it. It's just a computer. It's a really, really big one. And it can do lots and lots of things at once, like big computers often can do. And I just enjoy reading about it because it's a thing that I just have no visibility of, no access to. There are no big mainframe computers near me that I'm aware of. And I just like seeing all the details about how they get what I would see as a desktop and phone operating system running on these giant mainframes. I just think it's jolly good fun, and and it must be super productive, super good for her, because she's gets to play with these tools.
Yeah. It's slightly more interesting than a Raspberry Pi, for sure, right? It's like a computer full of computers. I had the opportunity to see these firsthand. About 18 months or so ago, I went to IBM in Stuttgart to where their R&D labs are for these mainframe systems. And it was a fascinating day, and I learnt loads, but my overwhelming memory was looking at this sort of stealth fighter shaped massive computer. Was, when I die, I want to be buried in one of those.
They're about that size, aren't they?
For the plus size gentleman, a perfect size coffin, definitely.
Oh dear. Right, Martin, is Mia dead yet?
No, Mia is alive and well, and I'm delighted to say that Mia, the excellent display server that is also a Wayland compositor, has had its 1.8.0 release.
Gosh.
Right, and what's new in 1.8.0?
High DPI support.
Ooh.
Yeah, it's come along pretty well since... I don't know. I remember us talking about 1.0. It was like a symbolic release. Maybe last year we talked about 1.0. And I know we keep throwing this in as, Mia's not dead. It's alive and kicking news. I think we should rename it from Mia's not dead news to Mia's alive and kicking. I think the positive angle is better to spin than the whole, this thing really isn't dead,
Yeah, I think
it'll go for a walk.
Certainly in terms of our listenership, I think they all understand that Mia is alive and well. And that was a bit of a tongue-in-cheek. Everyone had misunderstood the whole deprioritize. That was... How long ago? It's 3 years ago now, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, yes, Mia is alive and well. So, yes, maybe we should turn it into, exciting new developments from the Mia team segment.
They've also been fixing bugs on other platforms other than Ubuntu.
Right.
So bugs that were uncovered when running Mir on things like Fedora. They've focused on fixing some bugs there, which is good.
Cool. And we have a couple of event updates. Academy, which is the KDE Developer Conference we mentioned in a previous episode, have selected a date. They are happening on the 4th to 11th of September 2020 online. And there's going to be panels, workshops, birds of feather sessions on KDE projects, including applications, Plasma Mobile, coding, contributing, and more.
Yes. I've been to Academy. It's really, really good. I hope they can keep the same amount of information density that they had at the real Academy in the virtual one. I do hope so, because it's a super valuable and very friendly, I found, event. It's one of the best events, open source events that I've been to.
Yeah, I've never been, but I remember you talking very highly of it after you came back from that event a couple of years ago. Yeah.
Yeah.
And the Ubuntu Masters virtual event is on the 30th of April. It's deep dive technical discussions where you can interact with the speakers, access resources to help you kick off the ideas within your own organisation. So if you want to be an Ubuntu master, check it out.
Yeah, so I would say go and find the Celebrate Ubuntu YouTube channel, and you'll find videos there from people that presented at the first Ubuntu Masters that took place last year, and you'll find out what it's all about. You know, we had Brendan Gregg from Netflix talking about BPF and high performance network tuning in order to deliver, you know, streaming video from Netflix all powered by Ubuntu, and, you know, Roblox were there as well. So this is people that are at the top of their game using Ubuntu to do meaningful things and sharing all that they know with an audience of interested participants. And now you can all join too, because it's not happening in San Francisco. It's online for everyone.
Excellent. And that's all the community news and events for this week. And now it's time for the news. And what's first in the news this week, Martin?
Well, I'm delighted to say that one of my new most favourite desktop applications, Inkscape, after 16 years of development, is inching closer to a 1.0 release.
Wow.
Excellent. It's weird when you think 16 years that's been around.
It predates Ubuntu.
Oh, yeah, it does, yeah.
By one whole year.
So are there any notable things that are coming in Inkscape 1.0?
There is one significant one that I think every project needs, and that it's now using GTK3, so it doesn't look like OS2 anymore. So it has been a bit like GIMP. It's interesting that these two graphics applications that are sort of, you know, stalwarts of, you know, the open source ecosystem are still using GTK2, you know, when so many other things have, you know, moved on into GTK3. But yes, Inkscape's there. And I have to say, I've been using the snap of Inkscape from their Edge channel since, I don't know, October, November last year. And it makes a huge difference to the usability of the program just being based on a modern toolkit. And that's the first version of Inkscape I've ever used, and consequently the first version of Inkscape that I've learned. And I love Inkscape. I think it's an amazing bit of software.
They've got some comprehensive release highlights, they call it. Highlights is denigrating the document. It's very comprehensive highlights. There's a few things that I picked out from it. One, they've got I mean, they've improved a bunch of tools and added some tools as well. But one of the things that they've highlighted is flowed text feature. I mean, the way that text flows around something matches what browsers use. So if you're a designer designing web graphics, then you get a consistent feel that you're designing in Inkscape as you would get on the web, which is a nice feature. And weirdly to say on this podcast, it's now first-rate macOS application. So if you're running El Capitan, which is macOS 10.11 apparently, you can now get Inkscape as a native application on the Mac, which is useful to help transition those lovely Mac users across to open source solutions for their workflow.
So what happened before if you tried to run it on Mac OS?
I think it required some horrible X stuff.
Oh, the X
I see.
compatibility stuff.
So it wasn't super native. So, it didn't look super native.
I love the optimism of you inviting people from Mac OS over to Linux, but I think that this is...
No, I didn't say that. I said I very carefully said moving Mac OS friends over to open source software in their workflows.
Okay,
great.
So I would say that hopefully this ability to run on macOS and Windows and Linux now will signal the same success for Inkscape that Krita are enjoying, and more so Blender are enjoying now, where they as open source projects are becoming the industry de facto tools in those places. And it's interesting that they were born out of the Linux community, but they now are dominating, the mainstream desktop platforms. And I hope that Inkscape soon joins their ranks as, a mainstream application.
You mentioned that you've been playing with the version in the Edge channel in the Snap Store. They've also published the 1.0 release candidate. So it's not quite 1.0 yet. It's coming soon. Very, very soon. But the release candidate is in the candidate channel in the Snap Store. So you can snap install Inkscape -- candidate and get it from there.
Yeah.
Great. Right, Alan, what's GitHub been up to?
GitHub is now free for Teams.
Okay, you've got my attention. Tell me more.
So GitHub has for a long time had free tiers and paid tiers, and private repositories were the domain of the paid customer.
Yeah,
it was a way to generate revenue. And they've recently announced that now everyone gets a free tier. So
you get a free tier. You get a free tier.
Yes. You can now create private repositories on GitHub and share them with other people for free, which is great because we already know GitHub has won the code hosting war. And while others are available, and I know many people hate GitHub because it's a non-free platform, and I'm not especially pleased about that, and people prefer others. If that is where you've based your projects, now that you're maybe an indie developer or a very small team or students, and you want somewhere to put your code and have private repositories, that's an option.
Yep. I'm super enthusiastic to see this. I've been splitting repositories across different code hosting platforms to access private repositories, and that sounds like a weird thing. This isn't software that I'm putting in private repositories necessarily, but I have some stuff in private repositories, and it would be nice for all of those things to be in one place rather than having to manage different repositories.
We won't ask to see your commit log, don't
It's
worry.
basically like dot files, for example. I have my dot files in Bitbucket because they afford me a private place to put that stuff. And when we were working on our nonsense bash script games last year and we were keeping them secret from one another, I used, again, Bitbucket for that because I couldn't put them in a private place in GitHub, but now I could.
It's interesting the way they did it. They did a very short announcement and just said, hey, it's all free for everyone. And it sent everyone into a bit of a tailspin last week when they did the announcement, because obviously if you're a paid customer, it's like, well, what happens now? I've been paying for this private repository, and now what? Do I get a refund? Do I just not have to pay from this point onwards? Do I carry on paying? Is there other features that I could use? And I have a few private repositories either through groups that I've joined or myself directly, and I got a whole bunch of emails from GitHub saying, hey, you can now use this for free. And I think, well, I already was. But okay, thanks very much.
Right, and last in the news this week, Into the Breach 1.2 has been released with Linux support.
Is this
What's
a game?
Into the Breach? Yes, it must be a game.
It is a game.
Right.
So I think quite a few of our listeners are familiar with a game called FTL, which is a sort of spaceship fighting management game, which is a bit quirky, but basically you're in a ship with various rooms and people, and you've got to keep everything running while you're hopping between bits of the galaxy and fighting things and having encounters. This game is developed by the same people, but it's a bit of a different game. This is a turn-based strategy with roguelike elements.
That is like a boilerplate phrase that I've heard you say so many times. It's a turn-based strategy with roguelike elements. You could have said that about any game.
What I know about games is that Mark likes turn-based strategy games with roguelike elements. I don't actually know what those words mean when they're strung together, but I know that's Mark's jam.
I don't think
so the fun thing about this game that makes it a bit different is so you get your units that are deployed on a map, and the enemy units appear. And then each turn you tell your units what to do, but you can see what the enemy units are going to do on their turn. So you make your decisions based on what you know that they're going to do. So in response to that, you can try and move them around so that they don't hit something, or you can get in their way, or you can try and wipe them out entirely before they get the chance to attack you. And it gives you a bit of a different approach to your strategy, because you might, rather than just trying to attack and do as much damage as possible each turn, you might take a more strategic approach to the game. And with this release, they've done a bit of an overhaul of the engine, and they've done some rebalancing to sort of encourage you to try out more of what's available. There's different units and weapons available as you go through the game, and they've tried to encourage you to use more of those. But also, as part of it, the PC version is now available for Linux natively, which is cool.
So when you said listeners of the podcast may be familiar with the game Faster Than Light, I was thinking, the 1986 shoot 'em up available for the ZX Spectrum and the Commodore 64.
While when you started laughing, I knew that's what you were thinking. But I'm sorry, but Mr. Pedant over here needs to point out that FTL was the publisher, and Light Force was the name of the game you're thinking.
You're right. Yeah.
Faster Than Light Software was the name of the company.
Faster Than Light Software. Yeah.
Yes.
Oh. Right, and on that note, that's the end of the news. And that's all for episode 5. Thank you, everybody, for listening. We hope you enjoyed it as much as we did. If you'd like to get in contact with us and let us know your thoughts about the things we've discussed this week, you can email show@ubuntupodcast.org. You can come and chat with us between the shows in our Telegram group at ubuntu.org/telegram. And you can join us next week when we're going to be discussing Ubuntu 2004 LTS and all of the goodness that comes within.